Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We've had a very lively, a very passionate and vigorous debate across the House today. We've heard a very wide range of arguments and a very considerable amount of passion. It is clear, however, even so, that actually, when you cut through that air being discharged on either side of the chamber, there is a great commonality of values across the House. In fact, this House is united on the most fundamental issues facing us all. And those are the need to combat this terrible COVID virus, the need to protect public health, the need to make every effort to prevent economic harm to our businesses and to jobs and to people, and the need to protect the very fabric of our society. We all share those ambitions. And in order to do that, we need to do what the Chancellor discussed and mentioned last week. That is to say, we need to achieve a balance. We are trying to walk, in the words of the Deputy Chief Medical Officer last night, we are trying to walk a very fine line between getting the virus under control in those areas where it is surging and incurring minimal damage at the same time to the daily lives and livelihoods of people across the country. And it was noticeable that the Deputy Chief Medical Officer also made explicit in terms that he did not support a national lockdown and that he backed a local approach. And it would not be appropriate to impose the strictest restrictions across the country. And I thought that was a very important and telling point made from an independent advisor. Let me just say this. It's clear, that for the same reasons, that no government would, in any normal circumstances, wish to impose the restrictions we are discussing today. All I can do is to express my thanks and my recognition to the people of Liverpool, Lancashire, Greater Manchester, South Yorkshire for the fortitude that they have demonstrated and in the past, and that they are demonstrating and will demonstrate at this time. However, the evidence shows that the most successful countries in combating COVID-19 are those that have adopted localized measures to protect their populations. That is why we launched the 3 COVID alert levels for England based on the prevalence of the virus in those areas. Because while it is vital that we take decisive actions to control the virus where it is surging, as we did yesterday in Manchester, we must also recognise that COVID-19 is spreading in different ways and in different speeds across this country. This is a virus, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we do not fully understand in epidemiological terms or indeed in medical terms. But we do know enough to say that the epidemiological evidence simply does not justify introducing a national circuit breaker, and the costs of such an approach would be absolutely huge. And so I very much and vigorously would support the point made by the Honourable Member for Clwyd South when he said that there were weaknesses in the Welsh Government's decision to impose a circuit breaker because it would put tremendous strain on areas where there had been no great upsurge in the virus. It was a point also made by the former Secretary of State. I think he was absolutely right. It falls, in fact, into the category, I'm afraid to say, of being unnecessarily damaging to the economic fabric of our country. And the idea that it should have done so, as he put it in his words, without adequate scrutiny, is indeed a sharp contrast to here, where the party opposite has been vigorous in holding this government to account, and rightly so. Having said that, I think it's also important to say, as my honourable friend the Chancellor said last week, that these costs are not virtual costs. Every day a national lockdown is in place would bring costs, very real costs, in jobs lost, in businesses closed, in children's educations harmed. And they can be measured and weighed in permanent damage to the economy, which in turn undermines our ability to fund our public services. Let me briefly just remind the House what we are doing to support, in a broad, a deep and consistent way, areas facing higher restrictions. We are, in the first place, helping businesses with fixed costs such as rent and bills through a new business grant scheme. We are supporting local authorities in Tier 2 or 3 with significant new funding. We have introduced a national funding formula of £1 per head in Tier 1 areas with a high instance to 3 and to 8. And of course, this is just a COVID outbreak combat measure. This is just dedicated to a very small part of a much wider pattern of programmes of support, totalling, as the House will know, over £200 billion in total. To give a House a sense of scale, that means that areas in high or very high alert are receiving or will receive up to £500 million just focused on these public health activities to do with combating the virus, such as local enforcement and contact tracing, and that comes on top of the £6 billion we've already provided to local authorities since the start of the crisis. The third element is extra support for local authorities in Tier 3 in order to support. I would, but I've been given so little time. We've got so much material to get through. I hope the Honourable Gentleman won't mind if I press on. As the House will know, we've provided one-off grants to Lancashire and to Liverpool, and will continue to do so with other authorities. And finally, we're expanding the job support scheme. Businesses that have been legally required to close, whether in Tier 3 areas or elsewhere, will be able to claim a direct wage subsidy. Let me just say a couple of things slightly more widely, if I may, Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I wind up. The Honourable Lady opposite quite rightly said at the outset of this pandemic that it would be, in her words, completely inappropriate to engage in party politics on these desperately important issues of human life and human well-being. And it just gives me, and the Honourable Lady, the member for Ashton-under-Lyne, said we should not be having political games. I'm afraid an awful lot of what we have seen in the last 48 hours has been political games and party politics. It's a terrible, terrible shame. There is no reason, I'm afraid, love Manchester though I do, why it should be treated any differently as a special case to any other part of the country. Every country faces the potential of being struck down by COVID, and every part of this country should be supported in a proper way that is consistent across the piece. And when the Mayor of Birmingham says, by contrast, that he will not put lives at risk, I think we have to recognise the sincerity and the importance of the view he takes. I would also, if I may, just pick up a couple of other points that have been made on this. I do think that the lady spoke of Abraham Lincoln, a member of Salford Neffel. She may also remember that Lincoln said that the gentleman he spoke of compressed the smallest amount of thought into the largest number of words. We've seen a bit of that today, I'm afraid. The Honourable Member for Birmingham Ladywood called for rationality and a truly national strategy. That is exactly what we are offering, and that is what this government is giving her. I'm pleased to say that the member for Warrington South was absolutely right to highlight the danger of theatrics and the importance of not making this a north-south issue. It is absolutely not that. This is an issue in which we are all desperately concerned to do the same thing, to protect people's livelihoods, to protect their health, and to protect the fabric of our economy and our society. And what is the Labour alternative? A national fire break, a circuit break? We should do everything we possibly can to avoid that because of the unfairness of striking down areas which do not have high virus and suppressing their businesses. We all recognise there are economic costs associated with that. And if I may just end, I do not think it is consistent with the Labour Party's commitment to avoid party politics, to have descriptions from the opposite side of, in one phrase, I'm afraid, screwing people over, heard in this chamber, or indeed, I'm afraid, referring to a member of this chamber as scum from the Labour front bench.
The question is that the original words stand part of the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. No! Division, clear the lobbies.